Do you appreciate being called Mr. Maimane? Or do you want to be called Mmusi?
Mmusi is better, but I must be honest, just for fun. My father worked at a factory.
Yeah.
And I'm at an age now where I'm a father of 3 kids.
Congrats.
So sometimes,
Congrats and condolences to your life.
I know, right? Like, and I've got a 12-year-old who's now gonna be a teenager. So people tell. So there's something when I hear someone, I sometimes on radio will hear young journalists say, "Mr. Maimane." I think that's a respect my father never got afforded. At least I get to have some of that. I'm not pretty on titles, but there's something about that I understand. That I take it.
It's almost like gaining dignity on your father's behalf that he never had.
Yeah. It is that. And also that it's on your surname because it gives you that lineage of dignity that was taken away from previous generations to yours. Not Mr. Mmusi. That I'm not too worried about. Like, Mmusi is perfectly fine, but Mr. Maimane has something to it. I think it gives him something.
Thank you so much for coming through. This is not an interview. I don't know how to do interviews, and I wasn't media trained. I'm worried, and I think I did warn you before we went on camera, that if you and I start chatting about the politics in this country, it will take us 3 to 5 hours. So I'm hoping we will get to the 3 to 5 hours, but we'll do it over segments.
Sure.
I'm hoping today we'll speak mostly about Build One South Africa and political reform. And I just want to hear some of your thoughts. And I think when we sit again, I want to grill you. Is it grill? I want to ask you about a lot of things that especially Black South Africans are very sensitive about. You're married to a white lady. They see you as a coconut, a sellout. You're a white puppet. Your thoughts around the DA, of which you were a leader, etc., etc. But I know if we start there today, we won't get to Build One and we won't get to political reform. But more than anything, how are you doing? How's the family? How are the kids?
They're good. We're in that phase of life now where I'm navigating the pre-teens. Yeah. So that's, as a father, is always interesting.
Boy, girl.
So I've got 2 girls, and I've got a 12-year-old girl, a 10-year-old son, and a 2-year-old little girl. So I'm in 2 phases of my life. So the first 2 are now hitting that pre-teens age, and you don't think as a earlier on in their lives, kids, they matter. The mother matters. They're there. You are there, but there are things you can and cannot do. Now I feel like it's Premier League time for me because now identity issues, connection.
And it's a girl. Yeah. That's why I was asking. The girls in puberty and adolescence.
I told her, she brings the first one, I'll shoot.
Of course,
because you set the standards. Then at least people know. Don't pitch unless you've got guts. You know?
That's dope. You're happy?
I am. I'm in the best phase of my life. I feel freer. I feel clearer, and I think both those 2 things were important for me.
Yeah,
I've spent the last 3 years truly getting into more depth about what I think about what needs to happen in this country, thinking a lot more about just being free to be who Mmusi was made to be.
Yeah.
And
was
also,
made to be. That's a loaded thing to say.
I mean, firstly, as a person of faith, I think we are all created for a particular purpose, right?
Okay.
So, and the job that you've got to do in your life is discovering and expressing that. So that's where philosophically anchors my whole being.
Yeah.
I think there are other factors in society that want to force you to conform, to be this, to be that. And connecting with the original design has been the greatest joy of the last number of years for me.
It's beautiful. You're now doing more of God's work and God's purpose for you.
For me, I feel a lot more anchored. I feel like I'm not apologetic about certain things. There are certain things I used to. I think you depend a lot on feedback.
Yeah.
The younger you are, the older you are, you become less engaged in that and become more about what are the significant things I'm trying to do, and if you like them, cool. If you don't, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm becoming a lot more comfortable in that.
Do you sell out to the independents? I mean, you've built a new political party, and at some point we thought you were going to be the champion of the independents.
I think that was a mistake, and maybe it's a flaw of our own communication. You know, when we fought for electoral reform,
Yeah.
people made that to be synonymous with independence.
Okay.
But actually, what I really wanted was a democracy closer to people. You see, because to tell you the honest truth, when I was in Parliament, communities were there, but you didn't have to engage them directly,
Okay.
right? As a starting point. And secondly, you issues that were being discussed in Parliament were often so divorced from the day-to-day living of South Africans. So whether in truth, you know, you can obsess about Jacob Zuma, or you can obsess about this person, and you can fight his issues. Sure,
Yeah.
you're fighting corruption. But at the end of the day, Zuma or no Zuma, the quality of life for too many people in this country has not gotten better.
Yes.
So what I needed to do was to get back to say, how do we get democracy back to people? How do we ensure that politicians become genuine activists of their own communities? And if that meant that an independent in that sense, because no one is genuinely independent,
True.
but comes from that community, is elected by that community, they can then stand for public office.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing now under Build One South Africa is to actually aggregate all of those people and say, look, you are not going to win on your own. It's like franchising. It's like McDonald's.
Yeah.
You need the benefit of the national brand, but you yourself, you run your own store, you work in your own communities, but we sell burgers and chips.
Yeah.
Because other people might make the mistake of going, let's get any independent to stand. There are certain people who are independent, want to advance issues I don't stand for. They want to advance divisions. They want to advance racism. They want to advance bigotry.
Yeah.
You can't support that.
Sure.
So it's not just principally to say, well, let's just get any independent to run. It's also principally to say, let's engage communities, get the best leaders from those communities
Yeah.
to represent those people in public office. I think there's a universal question about where democracy sits, and that's a much more involved conversation for another day. But at least we must acknowledge one thing, is that democracy has become an elite sport, and we need to return it back to the people.
You're very right. What's electoral reform to you? What does it mean to you?
It means being able to re-engage people back into the center of democracy. So the electoral reform process that we've engaged in
Yeah.
is to say, let's reorganize the country perhaps into a more constituency-based thing. Let's get people to directly vote and elect their people.
Okay.
And let's make sure the issues that the communities identify are the ones that get debated in Parliament, if it's the People's Parliament. So the current electoral bill that we've got before us is a bill that simply says provinces are constituencies. Now, to be honest with you, if you live in Gauteng and you happen to directly vote for someone who lives in Pretoria and you happen to live in the Vaal, the probability of that person genuinely representing you is null.
Yeah.
So to me, the electoral reform process is saying to ourselves, if we true notionally, and I'm careful not to use slogans, but to say things like power by the people and for the people, let it be such. Let's make sure that we can come back and say, if Mmusi says I represent the people of Dobsonville, do the people of Dobsonville have access to Mmusi?
Sure.
Can they ask him questions on a regular basis? Is Mmusi available for their questions, not only for the voters who voted for him, but also people who didn't vote for Mmusi?
Yeah.
So let's create a platform for that to happen. And that's the first instance. And on the more serious instance, one day we'll get to a point where maybe we can directly elect the president so that we don't feel as a country this churning anxiety whenever there's a big elective conference of the ANC or whoever to think, hey, those guys are electing our president. No, they're electing their president.
100%.
Let's get back to saying, how do we elect our president? So for me, it's about strengthening democracy. It's not perfect. It's got its own flaws.
Yeah.
But it's about bringing it closer to the people and making it more direct and consequential.
Sounds good amandla awethu, but it does look a lot like amandla wabo today. The ward councillors, local municipalities are not filling this gap that you're saying of wanting to have people that are closer to you. Is their allegiance too close to focusing on party matters than the people they're meant to be representing?
I think the national infrastructure often dictates the culture that gets set up all the way down to the bottom.
Okay.
So you end up sometimes even with a ward councillor who lives in a community, but they become this party ward councillor.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that what our constitution was set up in such a way that we speak about spheres of government rather than tiers of government. So one doesn't relate back to the next. And the competencies that a local government does are uniquely different to one that a national government does. So when there's a problem with a school, as a real practical example, a ward councillor cannot do anything about a school because it's not within their competence.
That is true.
So who's the MP? So let me use a real live example.
Yeah.
Paragwana, Charlotte Maxeke, both those hospitals have got their own issues. Charlotte Maxeke just burnt down recently, which means capacity doesn't exist. The truth of the matter is that who's the member of parliament who's coming to parliament saying, I'm here to fight for nothing else but Charlotte Maxeke?
Yes.
You see, what we've lost, which is different to the sort of activism you saw pre-1994 and in the earlier days of post-1994, is you had a leadership cohort of people who will arrive in parliament and say, I'm the education guy.
Yes.
Or I'm the health guy.
Yeah.
And I'm here to fight on that behalf.
Yes.
What we have at the moment is careerists who join a political infrastructure and serve the party. So at the end of the day, even a ward councillor, if you're not affiliated or a member of that party, the services you get from them are like non-existent. If you say, I need you to help me with this. For example, the disbursements of indigent money, right?
Yes.
That disbursement is meant for local government to know, Guti, in that house, there's a child-headed household. In that place, there's this. But people don't do that. Instead, when there's a funeral in that same house, you see ANC banners or you see DA banners, you see all of that. We have lost an ability of public service.
Yes.
And for me, we've got to restore that if we're going to get leadership that is accountable and that works for people. So for me, honestly, I think ward councillors, whilst they are elected in communities, are often careerist and party people, and sometimes see it as phase one in the hierarchy of the organization.
Would you say that Build One South Africa is the next step of the work you'd started doing in electoral reform and supporting independence?
Yeah,
based on what you were saying?
It is, and the reason I started Build One South Africa was to say, okay, we've advanced, we fought for a bill. They're giving us this watered down version, which is not what we want. How do we practice what we want in real terms?
Okay.
So So we then went out and identified communities. I want to give you a real life example of how this works. You can go to the Eastern Cape, identify people who are already fighting in those communities. Say to them, guys, you're going to struggle to win on your own. Let's help you. Let's work on common issues and common values. We stand together collectively to say we share the very value of Ubuntu, which identified shared humanity and interconnectedness as a result of that. We said, ideologically, can we organize people through radical centrism, which at least aggregates? It says, you know, we're neither, we don't want to polarize society on that best. We want to find what works at the center collectively and what are the best ideas. And then we took the next step out of that and said, here are the 10 big ideas that we want to see in this community. You know, whether they're on education, healthcare, safety, economic development, direct elections. Said, okay, here's our menu of items that we can give. Let's go into those communities and identify people who share those values, share that vision, and want to serve their community in that way. And what we're finding is that suddenly, for the first time ever, and I'm grateful to be able to say this, we've now got fresh talent coming into Parliament. You know, one of my saddest things is that I feel like if I went back to Parliament in 2024, I wouldn't have to reintroduce myself. It would be like, oh, Sasela. You know what I mean? Like we have a pension fund that's
100%.
occurring there. And I just think you lose ideas, you lose freshness. Somebody who says to me, no, I was at a rally with Oliver Tambo. What is that person going to tell us about the metaverse?
Yeah.
I mean, let's, you know 100%. What I mean? So I am working hard to say, let's get fresh talent.
Yeah.
Let's get also people who don't come classically from politics.
Yes.
You know, in the team, I've got interesting people. I've got lawyers who have decided that the one person used to work at the Constitutional Court, serious. They said, I want to stand for an election. Why not? We mustn't make politics this very complicated thing that people can't serve.
Yes.
The history of parliamentary democracy emerges out of citizens who got to post their careers to say, let's create a platform where we can discuss how we can be much more effective over a long run.
Yeah.
Now, today, we've got people who wake up in the morning and say, I want to be a career politician. For what point?
Sure.
You don't represent anyone. You don't know what's going on in communities. Let's get those people to come through. So we've got ambassadors, we've got business people, we've got some are politicians and some have come through a combination of various civil society and NGOs. That team of people that we can bring to Parliament now suddenly can be attuned to their communities but have the skills base to deal with what this country must be about.
Yeah. You're saying that independents almost can't do it alone. Yeah. And that, for me, with party politics that we have, that's already a huge barrier. It seems like there's still currently an acceptance that you need to have a lot of money to be influential. Yeah. Do you have an opinion on how we can try and fix that?
And let me be, I mean, a lot of money is a subjective term, right? Like, what's a lot of money to who? But let me at least simplify it and say, you know, Nomvula Mokonyane says a number of years ago, whether it's a fact or not a fact, he says, we spent R1 billion on elections.
Yes.
Right? So that's a lot of money.
It is.
So I want to quantify it so that at least you get a sense of, okay, if parties are going to spend in that region, an ordinary South African is not going to wake up in the morning and raise R1 billion and say,
absolutely
I'm going to campaign.
It's
you know what I mean?
It's impossible.
But if we reform the Electoral Act to a point where elections are fought amongst smaller constituencies, at least I can see it probable that that same individual could say, no, I don't need R1 billion to campaign in the whole country.
Yes.
I need a few thousand or maybe tens of thousands to fight in my constituency.
Okay.
That may have a few 100,000 people, but I can get to them. I can do door-to-doors there.
Yes.
I can, get my message out there.
Yes.
And that's what a constituency-based model has its own power, because now you're not contending for 12 million votes, but you're dealing with a few tens of thousands of votes to be able to participate. That's why, in part, you need to fix the Electoral Act. But on a broader level, the reason we've built the franchise is to say, we can then aggregate the cost spend across that. Because if you had shared services, you are able to then go back to those communities and say, okay, like if you're a McDonald's franchise, you don't have to spend all your money trying to get a brand to be recognized everywhere. You can do all of that. We can give that to you. You can just plug and play and engage your community, knowing that you've got a baseline to work from. Okay. So that's what we're trying to solve for and trying to help with the money problem, because I completely agree with you. On your own, you are not going to win. And worse than that, the probability of you being able to accrue the votes to match a political party, once you've done that, you only get your seat and get nothing else. So if I say popular South African is maybe Thuli Matonsela,
yes,
say Thuli, stand in this community. She stands, she gets 200,000 votes.
Yes.
She only gets her seat.
True.
And the rest of those votes are wasted post facto.
Sure.
Right? So let's make it possible that people like Thuli can also be able to lend their brand to South Africans who share similar values to be able to go, I'm going to help you. And that, to me, the triangle works best when you've got a body like BOSA, you've got a community that sits here, and you've got a candidate.
Yeah.
And once that triangle is complete, you're able to have a contract that says, Mfo, or Mama, what you do is you work for the community, you break that contract, you're out, you break the law, BOSA will take you out, so you are always accountable when you go to Parliament.
Do you think the IEC is doing their job, realistically? And who do we blame for that? Because I worry, in effect, one of the things South Africans don't know is that almost all our elections since 94 have been unconstitutional. And I don't know if anyone's ever going to argue that that means all our presidents should not have been standing. They unconstitutionally were leaders. Do you think the IEC is doing their job in terms of really educating voters? And now that we've concluded and confirmed that the way we vote is almost wrong, do you think they're actually making a real effort, especially leading to 2024?
The IEC is best equipped to be able to deliver elections, right? It's a bit like
the event itself.
The event itself. They deliver. We all wake up on one day and we all go cast our votes, and by and large, most people will get a ballot and IDs will be checked and all of that sort of things. But in as far as I've been most disappointed with them in the recent while, because when we presented the bill to them to say, even in you calculating whether the votes afterwards are the representative will of the people, I found the IEC shy. I found it sitting back and kind of going, we are only the referees. When if we were soccer, we are only refereeing. You guys go sort out the rules. I'm like, how do you as a referee in such an important match not have a stronger voice? Be able to go, that's practicable, that's not practicable. Be able to go, actually, guys, for us to strengthen this thing, we're going to go educate people. If I said even here on this podcast to say, hey, guys, next year you will have 3 ballots. People don't know that. And I'm going, people by now must be thinking hard about what they're going to do, right? I think further than that, on broader issues about voter education, today we have a minority of people voting rather than a majority of people voting, which tells me that they're not doing enough. Furthermore, even on a basic level, the IEC should at least be advocating to say, when a matriculant goes to apply to write their matric exams, they all get an ID. They have an ID and they get an ID number. Why don't they, at the same time as that, register to vote? I mean, surely there are already places where young people are at to get them to participate. But no, it's complicated by design. There's a book called Nudge, and the work around behavioral economics says to you, you create sludge so that it's hard for people to engage a particular process. I think the IEC has created sludge around voting.
Money, again. Well, number one, maybe a small joke. Your thoughts around the linkages between BOSA and BOSASA? I don't know if you've shared some of your thoughts.
No, people make that mistake.
South Africans are funny people. We enjoy a little chuckle.
I know. And I think sometimes, I say, Bossa Gema. So we always, I get that, but that's all right.
Money. So we worry a lot. We've worried about you, the DA, we worry about the ANC, we worry about the EFF. How comfortable are you with the current, I don't even know if it's really requirements to expose who funds you. How comfortable are you to speak about some of your funders? And are you even comfortable to speak about the fact that certain funders literally actually want certain things to be done for them?
It's a both end, right? Like we've when the current funding bill was being purported in Parliament. I remember how very unpopular saying to people, this thing has the risk of supporting status quo. And undermining future projects. Which
please unpack that. What that means.
Because most funders were comfortable enough to say, if I've got 10 million, I'm going to look at the 2019 elections or 2014 elections and just divvy up the money as per that. It sounds safe and you sound like you're doing the right thing. But you're not helping advance future projects, and you mean that the party that's been winning keeps getting the bulk of the money.
Of course.
And they're going to keep winning on the back of that money. So I thought that was a problem. And then anyone who decides to fund anyone who opposes the government, in a system that's so patronage driven, where you get a government that allocates tenders to particular people, suddenly if the guy who got a tender with a municipality fears that if I fund the opposition want to change the thing, then you got a problem. And the third issue is that South African funders, which is a limited pool of people, to the agenda question, often have to say to themselves, okay, if we just do it like that, it makes us seem nice. But I often ask people, okay, so if you fund a party that wants to expropriate land without compensation and you're a mining house, are you okay with that? Like, you must tell me, because you've helped sponsor a particular political project or on whatever issue. So I knew there'd be problems coming up going forward. And worse than that, it would stop some people when you made the threshold at 100,000 from being fearful enough to kind of go, okay, I don't know if I cross over and I have to be disclosed, what's going to happen. So let me say the few principles. The first is, of course, I'm supportive of the idea of transparency.
Okay. Why? Sorry.
I'm supportive of it because I think the brevity of people, we must mature our democracy for you and I to know each other's votes and who we support without the hatred of each other.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Like, And I think we've created a climate upon which people hide who they support because we kind of, democracy is such that we imbue a whole ton of things. Oh, if you support this party, you must be racist.
Yes.
Or if you support that party, you must be corrupt.
Yes.
All of those kinds of things. We got to mature democracy to that. The second is, I also do think that given the state capture conversation, I can't negate the fact that some of that was an outcome of the triangle of corruption, where you buy a politician who occupies office, funds your business, you make profits, you buy the politician, and so we go. And in our current electoral system, you don't even have to buy the whole party. You just a few politicians and then you're done. So I happen to think that the transparency bit is important for those reasons. But I also do think South Africans must be brave. This is where I've got a problem with business. Yeah. I think business, it's historically always said, business has never found a government it does not like. It happened during apartheid, it's happening today.
Yes.
The lights are off. Where is the voice of business?
Yes.
Yet it materially impacts the sectors of society that are involved. Businesses are shutting down today, yet they are quiet in the face of that.
They're not saying anything.
It's like it's common cause. And I'm saying to them, now we need to put up our hands and say, we don't accept this. And use the resource and the means that are before us to achieve real change and accountability. So for BOSA's point of view, we've really gone out into communities, asked them to fund. They also fund those candidates in different ways. Yeah, sure. Will I get donors who at a national level might have a particular interest or an ideological view? That's always going to happen. But that's why we foreground everything we do with a 10-point plan and the values to say, here's our project. Yeah. If you endorse that project, then fund it. Sure. But if you don't, please don't, because you'll corrupt it. Yeah. And corrupting it is not a function of just saying, look, I want you to do sideline deals. You can corrupt it by saying, instead of fighting for non-racialism, why don't you just fight for the preservation of a particular race? Yeah. And all of those things. So you corrupt our mission, which for me, the mission is to genuinely see a South Africa upon which there can be shared prosperity and an equity for South Africans who are left out.
Do you think politics is the only solution? I mean, I look at the work by AfriForum, Gift of the Givers, and other civil organizations. Do you think there's a chance that over time, those groups might end up becoming more influential? I mean, especially from a funding model, it's almost crowdfunding. Yeah. And from a constituency model, some of them literally focus on some of their communities, wherever they may be.
I hope they do well, and I hope they strengthen, because there's a different degree of activism that is engaged when you are not looking for rewards of public office. Yes. So whilst the most famous ones are things like AfriForum, etc., the infamous ones, you can go to Abahlali Basemjondolo, whatever you might hold of their view, they are doing something for their constituency. Yes. You can look at various community. I was dealing with an engaged, at the moment, a society called Baagi, who is in Atteridgeville. They're doing some phenomenal work about empowering their communities. So there's a degree within me that wants to get back to this, that maybe in 1994, we saw Mandela, we saw the ANC, we said, take the power. Yes. Tina will do our own thing. And we negated the country. Yeah. I think there isn't a counterbalance to politics. And I think we need an increased level of activism so that we dare never again feel that our fortunes as a country are only limited to politics. And so the mantra and the philosophy that we hold is broad and inclusion. Even in the letter I've written back to this sort of moonshot thing and all of that sort of thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it another time, is because I said to them, invite various people. The collapse or the ending of apartheid was not just a political exercise. Yes. There were religious leaders who got involved. No one can deny people like Archbishop Tutu, people like Bears Nodia coming on board fighting. There was business communities who then got involved. There were many others who were at the forefront of that fight. Maybe they weren't rewarded with public office in that sense. Yeah. But you know what? They formed a collective to say, let's bring about change. Leadership of society And this is what we're missing at the moment. I think South Africa's biggest nightmare is that the adults have left the room. And now you have people who are playing around doing things. And when you see things that adults must talk to, you know, I maybe in that sense, I come from that hierarchy. You know, the adults must talk now.
Yes.
The adults have left. The adults leave things, people stealing things, people doing mad stuff. And I'm like, come on. Where's the adult here who says, we're not going to do this in this country? You know, I see people standing up, and I don't want to attack individuals, but even this thing of going to restaurants and fighting immigrants, in what universe can that be allowed? I know immigration is a problem. That's the adult conversation.
Yes.
The adult conversation is, how do we manage immigration? How do we do that?
Sure.
But why do you let the children go out by Obuza Bantu count in Zulu? If you can't, then we're gonna, you know, then you can't be from here.
100%.
That's irresponsible leadership. So I want to get back to a place where you've got, others would describe it as a center holding, but I think the leadership piece and the adulting in South Africa has disappeared, mainly because also the current government itself has lost its credence with society. So I want more people, man. I want more people.
Are you ready to be president? Would you like to be president of South Africa?
Yeah.
And how would you be different if you were president?
I think I want to get back to activism. I honestly want to give power back to people. But, so let me, you know, when I think about the question more, if you asked me the question maybe 5 months ago, it's, no, the president, you know, this is that. I've become much more animated by do something.
Yes.
And the position is secondary to what you have to do. Don't seek the title, look for the job.
Yes.
And there are massive opportunities that the president, or at least the occupant of that office, has that they can do.
Yes.
To reframe the values conversation and be able to give, I think the next phase of leadership is not going to be this dictatorial thing. It's got to be a lot more spiritual.
Yes.
And why I say that is because I think there's a sense upon which this country, we're losing our sense of who we are.
Yes.
I really want to fight for, what does it mean to be South African? What is justice in this country that we can fight for? And how do we inspire everybody to not look to the man and say, or the woman and say, you are a hero? But how do we inspire people to collectively, let's go serve? And so to me, I would hope that if you got into that office, it wouldn't be a question of just being able to go, well, I'm now in charge. But it'd be a question of, I'm the first activist in this country.
Yes.
And let's all of us roll up our sleeves and go do it. Because there are incredible South Africans. And I'm not saying that to be like all rah-rah, but honestly there are. There are people, you know, I think about the young South Africans who are inventing rocket fuel. I think about the entrepreneurs that we see who are hustling day in, day out. I see about those who keep our township stable because day in, day out they're doing stuff.
Yes.
Partner with those people and let's make it different. I see the fact that in education, in that space, my gosh, the outcomes of education today would make Verwoerd proud. Honestly, like, Verwoerd would be like, I could never have thought about it like that, but you guys have taken it to a new level. Right?
You're passionate about education,
you know,
I know.
Like, I'm like, come on, let's change it. Let's give kids the best. I can compare my kids and my sister's kids.
Yeah.
My sister lives in Soweto, outside Krugersdorp. I look at the schools my nieces go to.
Yeah.
70 kids in class. I look at my kids.
70.
Yeah, same public school education, 70. My kids go to classes where there are 30 or so, if it's a big class. Sure, it's an income issue.
Both are public schools.
Both public schools. During COVID, my sister's kids are like falling behind.
Yeah.
I can't deny that. My kids click on, they're online, they're doing their thing. Come on, guys. We are perpetuating the many South Africas we have. The prospects of a child in Soweto and the prospects of a child in Stellenbosch are exactly the same as what they were before 1994. Come on. from an educational outcome point of view, the train tracks remain exactly the same. So to me, there must be a minimum threshold upon which the education of all kids in this country empowers them for the future. That's something that's easy to do. It's not complicated. It's like saying, where do you set up a call center? Well, you set up a call center where there's most employment places.
Yes.
Internet is not less or more faster or important than Santi.
Yes.
It's internet.
Yes.
But let's put the centers there so that citizens can benefit. So for me, the question is loaded. I'm more animated by what is there to do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to do. And even if I never arrive at the first office, you trust me, I'll be doing it.
You spoke about 3 ballots. Is that a real thing? Or were you just making an example?
It's
and
not,
what does
it's
that mean?
not. It's coming. You'll have to vote for the party, the proportion, the PR vote, and the candidate as far as independents are concerned. At least that's what the current model.
So you're going to vote for a political party to run the country? You're going to vote for someone to run the province?
The proportional representation of the aspect of it. So they're going to calculate what happens. And in fact, there's been a discussion about whether the provincial ballot is always a separate one.
Yes.
But on the second ballot, you might have parties and independents. So there's a whole discussion. But I know for a fact, going into election 2024, you are not only going to be sticking to the traditional 2 ballots you normally have.
Hectic. And the third one is strictly for independents.
Well, that's the thinking. Or if not the case, that's what they want to do. And they want to make it national, regional to national, and then national to national. But it's a whole thing that people must be alive to, and the IEC must educate people around.
So I have a little bit of political knowledge, but I realize I'm not as politically schooled as I thought I was.
No.
Listening to you now, what I'm hearing is Build One South Africa is almost for independents that want a bigger home. They remain independent, but they almost under the umbrella of Build One South Africa. I'm asking this because I wanted to ask, what type of member do you want to join Build One South Africa? Is it someone who wants to join BOSA? Or is it someone that's actually almost following an independent candidate, but says, because I'm following an independent, I also support BOSA by default?
I want, and the word independence is the confusing part.
Okay.
I almost want us to disabuse us of that term.
Okay.
And say, park it. They are independents.
Okay. Strict independence.
Strict independence. Those are people who say, Mina, I run a soccer club and my soccer players are going to vote for me.
Sure.
That person is independent.
Sure.
I want community representatives who join BOSA to say, this is our home. It's a political party.
Yes.
We're not going to shy away from that. But this is our home because we represent these ideals and we serve this community. So
yes.
The way we've been able to identify candidates is we've made it open. A political party arrives with a list, says, 400 candidates.
Yes.
You pick and choose, but this is who they are. Tina, we said, let's open up the door. We've had just under 500 people apply. We are screening them, testing them. We are making sure they have constituencies. We've asked them to go get signatures from their communities.
Yeah.
I've never seen people now work in their communities because now they know. And people are submitting signatures of people who come from their communities.
Yes.
And further on from that, now we suddenly saying to them, do you agree with us on these values? So we must know that up front. I don't want to because the other danger of independence is the danger that people correctly point out, which is to say, this guy is so independent that when they arrive in council, they get overawed and seduced by money and power, that eventually you get people buying them and then they shift votes and all sorts of nonsense like that. We don't want that.
Yeah.
We are clear. This is what you had. That's why I always say, think about it like the same business model Uber has.
Okay.
Uber is national.
Yes.
It's got a brand. You know when you come into an Uber, you can expect this. You expect the driver who's sober. You expect the car to be clean and safe and all of that. And it will get you to your destination on this platform.
Yes.
But the owners of the car, the driver and the community.
Okay.
Think about us like that. We are this national brand that is going out to identify people who want to serve, who share our values, and they will come in and work. We are community driven. I maintain democracy must get back to the people. So that's what we're doing. So think about us like that.
Do you think you'll never rejoin a currently big political party?
We're going to be big. It would be like saying to me,
the three
why don't
big
you
boys
join?
now, if they seduced you, let's say something radical happens to the ANC, something radical happens to the EFF, the DA tries to woo you back. would you potentially consider?
No, not at this point. Mainly because it would be a bit strange for me to repeat and go back to a system that I don't endorse. You know, when I resigned from the DA, people say to me, hey, you had businesses, you had all of that. I left to no income. Literally, the day I resigned, I got back home. I remember that Christmas. I ain't messing around like this. That Christmas, I said it in my office. I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to buy these kids Christmas presents.
Jeez.
Right? And I don't think about how we're going to do that. Because for me, politics must be about principle. If it becomes about money, then you can become seduced. People call you up, say, hey, come. Hey. It's not my interest. I had a principle position that said, this is not working. I'm not going to serve parties that divide people. I'm not going to serve. I don't want that.
Yeah.
I want to build One South Africa and get back to it. And we've had to pay the price. I have not even, I don't take a salary from Build One South Africa.
Jeez.
Because I think if I'm an activist number one, let others be activists.
Yeah.
Let's show it to the people. Politics mustn't be about career. Do other things to earn money.
Sure.
But politics must be about whether you're passionate about the things, you want to serve the things, and you want to fight. And I'm not saying I'm an angel.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm merely saying, though, model the things you believe. So to the seduction question about going backwards, the radical reform would have to be the collapse. Because when I think about our future, globally, there's a genuine discrediting of institutions.
Yes.
Leaders who are emerging now, Macron, even Trump, for whether you love or hate Trump.
Yes.
Sam Matakatsa, Hakainde Hichilema, so many, Bobby Wine in Uganda. What features all of them? These are people who left institutions, came forward and said, let's find something new. Trump was not an institutional candidate, he captured one.
Yes.
Sam Matakatsa started 6 months ago as the Prime Minister of Lesotho. HH, the President of Zambia, started UPND in 2009, fought for a cause and succeeded. So if the future is pointing towards a fresh, new democratic dispensation, why, to use a biblical version, go pour new wine in old wineskins? Like, why do that? Let's find a new way. And I think it's not just unique to politics. I think it's true of even our own ideological prisms and frames.
Yeah.
Because no one today can say, I'm an ardent fighter of capitalism. No one today can say, I'm an ardent defender of socialism.
Yes.
They may claim that.
Yes.
But even at its core, they know that each of those systems have been significantly discredited.
Sure.
To a point where people are asking, what is the new? And I want to be part of a generation that authors the new. Even on environmental issues, who would have thought that the poster child of environmental issues is a teenager, in Greta? But who would have thought that?
Yeah.
But it demonstrates the fact that there's a genuine hunger for new. And let's rather do that than want to repeat. I'm not trying to solve my parents' problems.
Yeah.
There are many.
Yes.
And the history is stacked up against them. But I'm trying to solve problems of my kids.
Sure.
And yeah.
My last two questions to you before we close. Number one, how do you feel about an independent Cape, personally? Or what's BOSA's stance? And then number two, your opinion on the land question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the independent Cape part, the Constitution already gives profound powers to provinces. So provinces must use those. But we don't need a new republic of Cape Town.
Yeah.
No, I don't endorse that view.
Okay.
I think I've always been an ardent fighter for decentralization and making sure the powers given to you in the Constitution you exercise to the fullest level.
Yes.
That can happen in Johannesburg, it can happen in KZN, it can happen anywhere else. But I don't subscribe to an independent Cape, and I sometimes worry that some of the sponsorship dynamics about who wants that
Yes.
are looking for something that is not in Constitution but for other reasons.
100%.
And sometimes I worry about that.
Sure.
I worry that you might fragment the gains we've made in being able to build a diverse South Africa for all.
Sure.
On the land is about justice, right? But land is also about an economic issue, and it's an asset issue. So if we deal with the justice question, let us say if a family who lived here and demonstrated the fact that I own this was part of our heritage, our parents are buried here. Hey man, justice says let's find a way to bring restitution. I don't think that's a law question. I think that's a justice issue.
Yes.
I don't actually think that it's even a constitutional issue, because the Constitution's principle is on justice and makes it, Section 25 of that actually was born of the fact that black South Africans couldn't own property.
Sure.
They inserted that so that we can ensure that there's property ownership. So it's a justice issue.
Yeah.
But the second economic issue is that if it's an economic issue and an asset value issue, I'm talking to young people who also say to me, but you know what? Whilst there was an asset here, I might want to own different classes of assets going forward. And the ache is not sometimes the physical land.
Yes.
It's the equity conversation.
Okay.
It's the participation conversation. So if you said to me today, there's a young person who's sitting saying, I don't actually want the physical land, I want shares in X.
Yeah.
Let's make it possible for them to be participants because they've got equity. So when malls are being built in communities, I wonder if we couldn't give people equity in those malls so that they can watch their value increase.
Yes.
And then lastly, the actual living conditions, which, because often this is a space where people talk about title deeds and all of that. But I also do think that we can rethink all of that, because actually what we are now having to grapple with is how do we create effective ownership of property. That's on one level. And we can do that across. But I also think it would be a mistake for us to think that we're going to urbanize by simply allowing people to move from rural communities to urban centers.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yes.
What we've got to do is create equity and title in various communities and build infrastructure so that people don't have to feel they have to move. Because what eventually happens is that you end up with someone with a house and land in this community, but because it lacks economic opportunity, they migrate to this part of the country, and they end up living on the periphery of it.
Yes.
In the country of their birth. I think we can have a much more deeper, better conversation, even if we just introduce people to the equitable models of the future. Because at the end of the day, my dignity is restored when I can sit back and go, look, I got assets here. I own. I may not want to own this land, but I own this asset, these businesses, shares here, and all of that. Suddenly, I've got a material asset I can hand over to the next generation. That's different for the future.
Mmusi, Mr. Maimane, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really hoping we can sit some more.
I'd love to do
There are so many other topics, as I said earlier, that I'd like us to unpack. And I think in closing from me again, good luck. Pre-adolescent, pre-teen, is that the term used?
Twins.
Yeah, my firstborn is turning 13 this year. It's a boy. So good luck and condolences to both of us.
We must share notes.
Definitely share notes.
Start a support group.
We can definitely do that.
We can on WhatsApp be like,
Mmusi, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to sitting with you again soon.
My brother, let me say this. Please never stop. I know it's not what you set out to do, but never stop being critical of the political system, the politicians, and the actual crap that people think that is acceptable. Never stop putting up with it. Ask the hard questions. Never shy away from that. And never shy away. One of the things I most appreciate about you is that you put out opinions that people don't always agree with or like. And never stop doing that, because it matures our democracy at conversation level, but it also forces people who want to play in the public space to not think they can get away with just treating people like mushrooms.
Yes.
And you've heard the phrase, that you can really dig into that. So anytime, I'll be happily be back with more ammunition. but I appreciate it, my brother.
Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no. Thank you.